All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a mental model that is honestly ancient, but it describes our modern lives perfectly. We're looking at a paradox that has literally puzzled scholars and philosophers for centuries, right up to this very day. Let's just jump straight into it. So, here's the question. How does the wisest person in recorded history end up making some of the most foolish mistakes imaginable? I mean, you'd think a brilliant mind would act as a force field against terrible life choices, right? Like, if you know the right thing to do, obviously you just do it. Well, actually, history tells a completely different story. This question frames the entire tension of our journey today. We're going to look at a brilliant king, a golden age, and quite frankly, a spectacular, heartbreaking unraveling. And that brings us to the core of this whole thing, the Solomon paradox. This is the big idea we're unpacking today. It's that profound, almost tragic disconnect between possessing immense wisdom, knowing exactly how the world works, and the absolute failure to actually apply that wisdom to your own life. It's like being a brilliant advisor to everyone else while your own house is literally burning down around you. To guide us through this, we're leaning on a deeply personal philosophy we call Papa's Take. Papa, the author of our source newsletter, actually learned this profound lesson from his late father, Papa Q Bear, and it's something he shares with his wife, Colonel Debs. The lesson is simple, but man, it is heavy. The key to wisdom is to live what you preach, not just preach it. And doing that requires immense humility. It takes relentless self-awareness. It's not just a brain thing, it is entirely a matter of the heart. So keep that idea of the heart in mind, because it really drives everything else we're going to talk about today.
All right, Act 1, the Paragon of Wisdom.
Let's set the stage before the big fall. To really grasp the Solomon paradox, you got to understand just how massive his reputation was back in the ancient world. And it's fascinating. There's this brilliant Cambridge PhD thesis by Lucas Glenn Wisley that points out the Hebrew Bible doesn't just give us a flat, one-dimensional picture of Solomon. It's actually highly paradoxical. In 2 Chronicles, he's the model king, perfect fidelity. In Proverbs, the absolute paragon of wisdom. But then you read Ecclesiastes, and he's portrayed as this pessimist, totally frustrated by the limits of that very wisdom. And in 1 Kings chapters 1 through 11, which is what we're focusing on today, he is deeply ambivalent and deeply flawed. So we're dealing with a really complex, multi-layered guy here.
Moving into Act 2, a heart turned astray.
So here's the turning point. How does this paragon of wisdom become a literal cautionary tale? If we look at the historical data in 1 Kings 11, the contrast is just stark. On one hand, you have a direct, crystal-clear command from the God of Israel regarding foreign nations. You must not intermarry with them because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods, right? It's a blatant warning about the erosion of conviction. But then, look at Solomon's action. Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. It's the paradox in motion. The wisest man on earth gets the clearest instruction possible and just completely overrides it with his own desires. It really goes to show how quickly our deepest convictions can just erode if we aren't self-aware in the moment. And the sheer scale of this distraction, it's mind-boggling. 1,000. The text tells us he had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. Now, sure, historically and politically speaking, a lot of these were probably strategic alliances with nations like Moab, Ammon, Edom, and Sidon. But emotionally, spiritually, that created a rising tide of complexity that absolutely overwhelmed his judgment. As he got older, this massive, everyday distraction slowly, but surely led his heart totally astray.
And the result of all that was a divided heart. Now, he didn't just wake up one day and abandon his original beliefs. No, it was a compromise. He actually started building high places, altars, for foreign gods like Chemosh and Molech, literally on a hill right east of Jerusalem. He was basically trying to have his cake and eat it too, blending his foundational wisdom with the conflicting demands of his 1,000 wives. His heart just wasn't fully devoted anymore. It was fractured. And a fractured foundation just cannot support a kingdom.
You know, this wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow leak over a lifetime. Year 1 starts with these seemingly justifiable political marriages, holding fast in love. But fast forward a decade or two, his heart has actively turned. By the later years of his 40-year reign, the bill finally comes due. God decrees the kingdom is going to be torn away. It's a classic pattern, right? Gradual, unnoticed compromises in our daily lives almost always lead to these sudden, severe, and compounding consequences down the road. And for Solomon, those consequences took the shape of some very real, very powerful adversaries. As his wisdom failed in practice, the security of his entire kingdom just unraveled. The text explicitly names them: Hadad the Edomite, who came back from Egypt to cause trouble; Rezon of Damascus, who became a massive hostile leader in Aram; and honestly, most devastatingly, Jeroboam the Ephraimite, who was actually one of Solomon's own trusted officials. The peace that defined his early reign totally evaporated, replaced by rising tension and enemies closing in from all sides. Which brings us to Act 3, the kingdom tears apart. So that internal fracturing of Solomon's heart finally spills over into the literal fracturing of his kingdom, and it leads to this incredibly visceral scene. Jeroboam is leaving Jerusalem, and he's met on the road by the prophet Ahijah, who happens to be wearing a brand new cloak. Ahijah takes this pristine garment and violently tears it into 12 pieces, and hands 10 of them right to Jeroboam. It's such a striking visual metaphor. God was tearing the kingdom out of Solomon's hand, leaving just one tribe for the sake of his father David. The crown was shattered. Wisdom without practice didn't just hurt Solomon, it ripped his entire world apart. All right, let's look at the synthesis. Wisdom requires daily practice. So what are we supposed to do with this ancient tragedy? Well, we need to connect it to our lives right now, because the Solomon paradox isn't just about some ancient king. It is about us. It's about the danger of reading 20 self-help books, listening to 100 explainers, and changing absolutely zero about our daily routines. It comes down to 3 steps, going right back to Papa philosophy that we started with. Step 1, you have to recognize the gap between knowing and doing. Just admit that knowing the right thing is maybe 10% of the battle. Step 2, cultivate immense humility and self-awareness. You gotta check your own heart, just like Papa learned from Papa Q-Bear. Where are your blind spots? What are your 1,000 distractions? And step 3, practice what you preach daily. Wisdom isn't some trophy you put on a shelf. It's a muscle, and you have to exercise it every single day. To really drive this home, let's look at the Book of Wisdom attributed to Solomon's own era. Proverbs 12:15 says, "The way of fools seems right to them." And man, that is the ultimate danger of the Solomon paradox. You can be surrounded by knowledge. Heck, you could be the one writing the Proverbs. But without self-awareness, your own self-deception will make your foolish actions feel perfectly justified. You'll build altars to your own distractions, utterly convinced you're still on the right path. So that leaves us with one vital question to reflect on. Ask yourself, honestly, are you just collecting wisdom, or are you actually living it? Are you just building this massive library in your head while your daily actions look exactly the same as they did 5 years ago? True wisdom, as we've seen from history's greatest king, is entirely a matter of the heart, and it shows up in your daily actions. Take that thought with you today. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to take a hard look at the gap between what you know and what you actually do.